So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah! The Detroit Lions have done it. For back-to-back weeks, for consecutive weeks of the NFL playoffs, the Detroit Lions have hosted a playoff game, and they have won a playoff game. This time, the Detroit Lions played host to the number 4 seeded Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as they were coming off a great win versus the Philadelphia Eagles the week prior. The Detroit Lions and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers met for the second time this season. The first matchup, of course, being in Tampa Bay all the way back in week 6. And of course, this matchup being last weekend in the divisional round of the NFL playoffs, with the winner advancing to go to San Francisco. But before we get into San Francisco, before we get into how the Detroit Lions could potentially win and go to the Super Bowl for the first time in franchise history, I wanted to take a look at this divisional round matchup. Take a look at the Buccaneers as a whole. Take a look at this matchup as a whole, the positives and the negatives we can take from this week, and the positives and negatives we can implement for next week. So with all that being said, let's take a look at this divisional round matchup as the Detroit Lions advance to the NFC Championship game. The Lions ended up winning a really close one here with a 31-23 victory, with the game being tied pretty much the entire way up into the fourth quarter, right? The Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Detroit Lions traded field goals in the first quarter, and they went into the second quarter tied 3-3. They went into halftime tied 10-10. They went into the fourth quarter tied 17-17. And really, the fourth quarter was the deciding factor of this game, as the Detroit Lions were able to mount 2 touchdown drives and really 3 consecutive touchdown drives from the third quarter into the fourth quarter, while the Detroit Lions defense was able to make a stand, only allowing 1 touchdown drive in the fourth quarter, with a 2-point conversion eventually failing for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, this game got off to a very slow start, which is not something that I think a lot of people were expecting, with both teams having pretty poor ranking defenses across the league. I think a lot of people thought this game was going to start off with a little bit higher scoring, but the Detroit Lions started off with 3 plays on 7 yards, only taking up 46 seconds off the clock and having to punt. And then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers got the football. They started driving for 5 plays, but on that 5th play, a tip pass went right into the hands of C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who returned the ball for putting the Detroit Lions in pretty good field position. The Lions would answer that with a field goal on an 8-play, 37-yard drive, but Tampa Bay would march right down and answer right back with an 8-play, 50-yard drive, resulting in a field goal. The Lions and Bucs were tied 3-3 at the end of the first quarter. The Lions would open up the second quarter with a 14-play, 75-yard drive to take the lead with a touchdown early in the second, and Tampa Bay would punt in the resulting possession. The Lions would then punt after that. The Bucs would hold the Detroit Lions to a punt and not allow the scoreboard to change again. Tampa Bay would drive down for a 9-play, 55-yard drive, but end up missing a field goal as it bounced off the left post, leaving the Detroit Lions with a 7-point lead. The Lions would not do anything with the ensuing drive, punting, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as time expired in the first half, the Detroit Lions would allow a 92-yard drive on 7 plays with multiple 20-plus yard receptions by Mike Evans, as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers would drive down, tying this thing up 10-10 in the waning moments of the first half. The Detroit Lions opened up by giving the ball to Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay received in the second half. Tampa Bay would punt, the Lions would punt, Tampa would punt, and then the Detroit Lions would go on their 3 straight touchdown drives, as they started off with a 10-play, 64-yard drive going up 17-10, but Tampa Bay would answer with a 7-play, 75-yard drive taking up 3 minutes and 34 seconds. They tied it up 17-17. Detroit would answer with a more impressive drive, 5 plays for 75 yards, only 2 minutes off the clock, as they would go up 24-17. The fireworks were starting, the offense was starting to come alive, and this game was starting to become a high-scoring affair. But the Tampa Bay Buccaneers would have to punt. The Detroit Lions defense stood tall, and they forced a 3-and-out on the ensuing drive. And then the offense stepped on the field, and they went for 10 plays, 89 yards, making the score 31-17 with an Amon-Ross St. Brown touchdown in the back corner of the end zone with a just phenomenal pass by Jared Goff. The Tampa Bay offense would then go down and they would score on a 9-play, 75-yard drive, cutting the deficit to 23-31. The Detroit Lions would punt on their ensuing drive, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers would have one opportunity. They would have one chance at the end of this game to go down, drive about 90 yards, and tie this game up with a touchdown and a 2-point conversion. The first play was a 5-yard pickup by Chris Godwin. The second play was a game-sealing interception by Derek Barnes, the third-year linebacker out of Purdue. And before we get into kind of these stats of this game, I just want to say how fitting that this was, right? The first draft, the first class of the Brad Holmes era. Who was the first player to really stand out in the preseason? Who was the first player that caught everybody's eye, that everybody bought the jersey of, really saw the field and impacted the game the most from the very beginning? Well, in that 2021 preseason, Derek Barnes was the standout linebacker. He was the superstar of the defense. Everybody bought his jersey. Everybody thought he was going to be a star. And he's been a very solid player for the Detroit Lions. And I think it's just very fitting that the first impact player from Brad Holmes' first ever draft class ended up making the game-stealing play to send the Detroit Lions to the divisional round of the play, or to the NFC Championship round of the 2023 NFL playoffs. Starting off with the Detroit Lions box scores, Jared Goff I thought was actually pretty good. There was a couple of drives in the middle of the game from about middle of the second to beginning of the third where the offense seemed really stale and kind of stalled out. But Jared Goff on the day was actually quite good. 30 for 44, 287 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the day. No interceptions, but did take 2 sacks in the backfield. Jahmyr Gibbs was phenomenal. 9 carries for 74 yards, 1 touchdown on the ground, while David Montgomery had 10 carries for 33 yards, including a crucial first down on the Lions' last touchdown drive. Jared Goff actually had 6 carries in the game for 6 yards with a long of 7, and Craig Reynolds had 1 carry for 1 yard on 4th and goal for a touchdown. On the day, the Lions rushed for 26 attempts, 144 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Amon-Ross St. Brown was great. 8 receptions, 77 yards, and a touchdown through the air on 14 targets. Sam Laporta was back to his game-breaking ability with 9 receptions on 65 yards on 11 targets. Jahmyr Gibbs had 4 receptions for 40 yards. Jameson Williams had 2 for 35. Brock Wright had a big 4th down conversion, 1 for 29. Josh Reynolds had a touchdown, 2 receptions, 27 yards, and a touchdown. And the offense on the day, of course, had 30 receptions, 287 yards, and 2 touchdowns through the air. On defense, the Detroit Lions were not able to force a fumble this week, but they were able to walk away with a couple of interceptions. As previously mentioned, Derek Barnes walked away with the game-sealing one, and C.J. Gardner-Johnson actually came away with one on the opening drive for the Lions defense. Overall, defensively, Brian Branch was phenomenal. 9 tackles, 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss. Ifeatu Melifonwu, 9 tackles, a sack and a half, and a tackle for loss for him. Aiden Hutchinson had a sack as well as a tackle for loss on 4 tackles. Jalen Reeves-Maybin totaled for half a sack, as well as a couple positive plays there for the Detroit Lions. And just overall, the defense played really, really well. They had 4 sacks. They had 4 tackles for loss. They just, completely played a really, really well complete game on defense for the first time in a very long time. And despite that one really big drive at the end of the first half, I thought they actually kept Mike Evans in pretty good. They locked him down pretty well for the most part outside of that, again, end of the first half type of drive. Baker Mayfield, I thought, was actually really good on the day. Despite the 2 interceptions, Baker Mayfield went 26 of 41 for 349 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Although I will say the first interception was very much not his fault. He lost 30 yards on 4 sacks on the day as the offensive line really struggled to protect Baker Mayfield for most of the day. The rushing attack was significantly better this time around for the Buccaneers. They went 9 carries for 55 yards with Rachaad White. They went 4 for 19 with Chase Edmonds, and Baker had 2 carries for 15 yards in his own right. The team rushed for 89 yards on the day, which is not great, but it is better than their first time around versus the Detroit Lions. But the key, of course, is that 0 touchdowns in the rushing attack. Mike Evans had a great day, 8 receptions, 147, and a touchdown on 12 targets. Cade Otton went 5 for 65 and a touchdown. Rachaad White went for 4 for 36 and a touchdown on that screen pass. And overall, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers passing attack was really, really good. They were not able to force any turnovers off the Lions, but Levante David had a phenomenal day with 13 tackles, a sack, and a tackle for loss. And rookie Kalijah Kancey actually had a sack and a TFL as well for the Tampa Bay defense. Other than that, not a whole lot of noteworthy stats. The punting stats, Jack Fox went 5 for 218, 3 down inside the 20, while Tampa Bay went 4 punts for 207 with 1 touchback and 2 down inside the 20. Overall, this game was just a great game by the Detroit Lions. I thought start to finish, this might have been their most complete and impressive win on the season. Tampa Bay, I know they're 9-8. I know that technically on the season, they barely won the worst division in football in the NFC South. I know that they had a really long stretch of really poor games. And I think Baker Mayfield is a very hot and cold quarterback. But the fact remains that going into this game, I believe the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were on a 6-2, if not a 7-2 run as far as being the victors. They were on a very hot streak. They were one of the better teams in the NFL at this point. Obviously, they were able to defeat the Philadelphia Eagles a week ago, 32-9. I believe, on their home field. They were playing really good football. They were a very hot football team. And of course, they were a team that very much deserved to be in the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. They gave the Detroit Lions everything they had for 4 quarters. And again, the only difference in this game happened to be the 4th quarter that eventually saw the Detroit Lions rise to the occasion on both offense and defense. So with that being said, just kind of a quick recap of this game. If we want to take a look at team stats really quickly, I would imagine these are very, very close. 23 first downs for the Bucs, 26 for the Detroit Lions. Same amount of passing first downs. The Lions had 1 more rushing first down. The Lions ran 11 more total plays, but they were actually outgained by the Buccaneers in total yards as far as the offense goes. The Buccaneers outpaced the Lions in passing yards, but the Detroit Lions had more rushing success on the day. Both teams were pretty good in the red zone. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers were 3 for 3. The Lions were 3 for 4. Penalties were roughly the same for both teams. The big factor in this game is going to be the 2 turnovers by Baker Mayfield, and of course the crucial turnover there at the very end. I think the story of this game is just missed opportunities for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and really the Detroit Lions, I think, just having a slightly more complete team at this time. The missed field goals, the 2 turnovers, a couple drop passes by the Buccaneers, and the Lions ended up winning by 8. This game was super close. I think Tampa Bay has a very bright future, but for right now, we're focused on the Detroit Lions. They're going to the NFC Championship game. They're going to San Francisco next weekend to take on the big bad wolf of the NFC. I think there's a chance that the Lions win this game. I think there's a chance the Lions can advance to a Super Bowl, and we'll talk about that a lot more tomorrow. But with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Let me know down in the comments below your big takeaways from this game, who you thought played well, who you thought played potentially even poorly, and how you think that NFC Championship game is going to set up. With all that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you so very much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions.